Hey, what's happening? Before we jump into the show, I wanted to see if you had any music on a hard drive. You have a band, you have a project, and you want to self-release your own music. Well, there's an easy way to do it. You can go to distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate and go get your music up on all the streamers. You keep 100% of your royalties, and you can get 30% off by using this code. It's a great, easy way to get your music up on the streamers and share it with your fans, your friends, your family, your mom, your dog, everybody. Everyone wants to hear it. But go to distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate, HYPHENATE, and send me the link. I want to hear it too. Send your mom the link. Send your dog the link. They all want to hear it too. We'd like to thank our sponsor, iZotope, the absolute leaders in intuitively designed plugins for audio restoration, mixing, and mastering. At iZotope.com, you'll find a plethora of tools and suites that will enhance your audio production, whether it's voice, video, podcast, or a full production recording session. Check out the industry-standard audio repair tool, RX11, or the multi-tool mixer plugin, Neutron 5, or the powerful Ozone 11 mastering suite, plus tons more. Go to iZotope.com and use the code FRET10 at checkout for 10% off. That's FRET10 to get 10% off at checkout. And again, the website is iZotope.com, IZOTOPE.com.
I love it when you see a movie that is more grounded in reality, but somebody is trying to take it to like another place to make it evoke some type of emotion, make you feel something different, and using that as a storytelling tool. It's just like when it happens, it's just the best.
What's happening, everybody? How do you do? This is Hyphenate with me, your host, Randy Randall. It's our show for Thursday, May 1st. Look at that. Tuning in to know what the date is on the podcast. Another month has gone by in 2025. Hope everybody's surviving, thriving best they can. The impending tariff apocalypse seems to be just around the corner from all reports. But I'm not going to think about that right now. I'm excited to welcome an old friend who has a really big, exciting career achievement. My friend is director Josh Erkman, and he has a film titled A Desert that is available everywhere now. Go look it up. Go Google it. It's available on demand and in the major cities, at the art houses. It is playing. So stoked. I've known Josh for, I don't know, over 10 years. And he's always been super sweet and like a part of the, Los Angeles underground music scene. Always super supportive, always very cool. And I know this film was a labor of love. We're going to get into it in the interview, and just decades and decades of obsession and dedication to put something on screen like this. And it is a cool, trippy, dark, atmospheric mindfuck of a film, A Desert. Go check it out. I think you will enjoy it. The music is good. It looks awesome. It looks beautiful. It's got great characters in it, great actors. It features David Yao of the band Jesus Lizard, who is on tour right now. So they're supporting a new album. I think I'm seeing them this weekend here in Los Angeles. I talked to Josh about it. I think he's having his premiere this weekend, and Jesus Lizard are playing a big show, but never the twain shall meet. But nevertheless, David Yao is an actor in the film. So if you're a fan of the Jesus Lizard, you definitely want to go see A Desert. Yeah, really stoked. Really stoked. I mean, I've been a film nerd for so long, and this is fun. It's fun to get to do an interview, really get to nerd out on movies and film school. I had no idea. It's again, this podcast is so funny that I get to talk to people I've known for years, and we get to say things like, "Where did you go to college?" So for some reason, these are the questions that don't come up in just polite conversations. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to college? And then, you find out all kinds of things. So once again, this podcast is proving to be a socially relevant outlet for me to talk to my friends. I joke all the time. Yeah. Early on when my wife and I were dating, I'd introduce her to somebody, and she would ask me like, "Oh, well, how'd you guys meet?" I'm like, "I don't know." Like, how do you guys know each other? Like, I don't know. Like, well, like, where'd they grow up? I'm like, I don't know. You know, like, but we're gonna go out to dinner. And she's like, well, what do you guys do? You see each other every day. You see these people all the time. You don't talk about these things. I'm like, no, we just talk about music or, jokes or talking shit, talking about art. I don't know what we talk about, especially back then, men in our 20s, probably a lot of grunting and coffee and cigarettes. But, nevertheless, really stoked to share this conversation with Josh Erkman. To find out more about A Desert, you can just Google it. A Desert, Adesert. You can also find and follow Josh on Instagram. His handle is at Capes and Fog, all spelled out. And yeah, the film is out there. It is out there now. It is so exciting. You can also go to his website, capesandfog.com. That's CAPESANDFOG.com. I'll put links in the show notes too if you want to look at it there. Yeah, really stoked for Josh. This is huge. Yeah, and thanks, Josh, for coming on. I'm glad we got to talk and nerd out on movies for a little while. And don't forget, go to distrokid.com, use the code distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate to get your discount there. Also go to isotope.com to download some new Isotope bundles. All right. Josh, thanks so much for coming on Hyphenate, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Randy.
Awesome. Yeah, we've known each other for quite a while. I mean, this is great, but we were talking today as a film director. I'm so excited. Congratulations on your film.
Yeah, thanks, man. No, I'm really excited to have, it's been a long road with the movie, so I'm really excited for it to get out into the world in a bit bigger way. Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah. Well, I definitely want to talk about the film, but I want to let's back up and start a little bit at the beginning, where I first met you kind of playing music and bumping around in Los Angeles. But where do you come from? Where does the Josh story start?
Yeah, man. Well, I grew up just like in lovely racist East County, San Diego,
Okay.
and moved up to LA like to go to film school, like when I was
Okay.
17.
Wait, well, I'm trying to
So
think. San Diego, East County, is that like it's like deeper in than San Marcos? That's like
like El
the
Cajon, yeah,
okay.
El Cajon,
It's
yeah.
kind of deserty. You get
It's
the dunes not too far from there, right?
a little bit of ways
Ugh.
from that. I mean,
Oh,
it's
okay.
more like the way I kind of like imagine like a Santa Clarita that's like,
Gotcha.
half hour away from the beach.
Gotcha. Okay, okay. Inland from San Diego.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, all
inland,
that stuff.
definitely.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, and then LA for film school. Where'd you go to school?
I went to USC Film School
Oh, amazing.
and
What
while
years were
I
you
was
there?
oh my God, this is gonna make me feel really old. I was there, I graduated in 2001.
Oh, okay. I graduated in
Yeah.
2003, but I didn't go to the film school. I came in undeclared, wanting to go to the film school. So we probably crossed over. I started there in
Oh, that's
'99.
crazy. I had no idea.
Yeah, we never talked about that.
Oh,
That's so
very
funny.
cool. Yeah. Yeah,
these are the
so
these are the
yeah,
kind of
that's
things that my wife
amazing.
always asks me, like about friends, like, well, where do they go to school? What do they do? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like, well, what do you guys talk about? I'm like, music or movies, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I've realized this in my life. Like, I never have these conversations until it's a podcast sort of setting. You know what I mean? I don't know
Yeah.
how many brothers and sisters my friends have. I never talk about these kind of things.
Yeah.
My wife will ask me the biography. I'm like, I don't know. She's like, I thought you guys were friends. Like, yeah, we just don't talk about that stuff.
Yeah,
So
man, that's
SC
really
from
funny.
like 97 to 2001, something like that, 98.
Yeah,
Yeah.
97. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And then how did you like it there? What was your experience at SC?
Yeah. Oh man, this is a loaded question. So it was like, in high school, I was really into movies and I was also playing in like, crummy punk bands. And
Play the Che
I just
Cafe?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
one of the first shows I ever played was at the Che Cafe, like
Amazing. Yeah.
maybe sophomore, junior year of high school.
Whoa.
And yeah, like back when it was like, oh, we got to get, our demo cassette tape to the guy that's going to be there between this window and that window. And nobody had a car. So it was like, how do you get all the way down to La Jolla to
Oh
get to
my
the Che
God.
Cafe? So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
tucked up in
man.
in the hills and smells like eucalyptus. And you're like,
Yeah,
you come
yeah.
to discover it's just some guy going to college. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly.
He probably doesn't ever
Yeah, no,
listen
it
to your
was
tape.
actually pretty funny. Like, high school band, like, there was also like the Casbah down in San Diego. And we
Sure.
really wanted to play at the
You're 21
Casbah. And
plus
so,
though, right?
but we managed to make it happen. I mean, we
Oh,
would call
cool.
the bar with like this phone and like our physics teacher's like back room. And I'd book shows out of like,
That's
his
incredible.
back room. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it was just like, and yeah, so yeah, music, but I had this huge, huge passion for movies, and so
Where
decided
does
to
that
go to
come from?
film.
What have you been able to
Yeah,
trace that? Like, where does that
one,
implant?
one, one hundred
Yeah.
percent. Yeah, no, it's with the movie coming out, you reflect on a lot of this stuff. So I I got really into photography. So when I was like maybe like freshman and like high school, I really got into photography, and my but we didn't have any money to buy a camera. And so like my grandfather, he had this like camera and he was really into like the Boy Scouts and like I was a Boy Scout and he was like, all right, if you get your Eagle Scout, I'll give you this camera. And I was like, man, I stopped caring about it because I was a teenager and I was like, I'm not into that. But I was like, I really want this camera. So like I busted my ass, became an Eagle Scout to get this camera so I could just, I mean, it was like not even that great of a camera. It was just like, some Pentax K1000. It was a Nikon. It was like a Nikon, not even a great one, but
But
I
still,
had
that's
this
enough.
camera.
As a high schooler,
Yeah,
I mean, this is several $100s that you were never
100%.
gonna make. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and my folks didn't have the dough for it. And so he gave me the camera and then I was kind of like off and running. And at the same time, I was like playing in punk bands and we were recording stuff on like 4 track. And then I was like, there was this building that had like burned down in like the not too far from my house. And I, was like, I'm going to go take photographs of this. So I took all these photographs of this like burned down building. And and then I was like, I was putting them all together and I had them in like, I was like, I'm going to make this like installation thing. And I was already kind of thinking about things that way. And then I was like, oh man, what if there was like a soundtrack to like these photographs? And so I took like the 4 track that was at our drummer's place and I recorded all these fire sounds and manipulated them with like, some like, like the one effects pedal like our guitar player had and I had it playing with the photographs, and I was like, man, this is like really like this is really cool. And then like managed to like see movies that weren't like Star Wars or like big blockbuster stuff, and I was like, wait, like movies are just like pictures and sound. I mean, it sounds so stupid, but like for me, it was like this weird like revelation. Like I
Yeah.
movies are where it's at, like and
Like,
I still love
you would call that like
photography,
a
but
multimedia art project, like the
yeah,
name
but
of
it was just
oh
like,
yeah.
oh, there's pictures and sound and music. Like, again, a very obvious thing, but for me, like connecting the dots in this total caveman way, made a lot of sense. And so,
Well,
and
your
then,
product too of that. I mean, that time is sorry to jump in, but it's it's like home video, like VHS. I mean, it was like we're really of that generation, really, the '80s generation where VHS
yeah,
was a huge part of our lives, and part of a social sort of thing. Like, oh, we'd rent a movie on Friday night and watch it. But then, if you were nerdy in a particular kind of way, and punk and resourceful enough, you could find the
yeah,
cool art house sort of thing,
yeah,
or even
totally.
Hollywood Video, or Blockbuster
Yeah,
wouldn't be great, but still, you could probably go back
yeah,
20, 30 years of just watching the classics, and hits and things like it was
totally.
enough of a research that was available versus where the film brats of the 70s, I
Yeah,
mean, they needed to go to film school to even just see film, just to see these
yeah,
films played. There was no access to that. So, there was a resource there.
yeah.
It was in a different
Well,
way.
and then and I had one of these. I don't know, what do you want to call them? Like a wit, people have these wizards in their life, right?
Oh
Or
yeah.
they're just like they're going to show you the path, right? Whether
Yeah.
that's like an older brother or like a cool uncle or like cousin or somebody. And that guy for me was this like high school teacher I had in just our crummy public high school. and he was like this crazy. He was an old punk. He'd worked at the cool record store back in the 70s that was in San Diego, and he was a movie obsessive, and his whole classroom was covered in like great movie posters.
Oh, wow.
Everything from like Suspiria to like Herzog's Nosferatu
What did
to
he teach? What was his
he
subject?
was an English teacher,
Oh,
and he
okay.
somehow
So,
managed to
yeah.
like hoodwink,
Storytelling
them.
and yeah,
And he had like a film class, and so he had a huge VHS and Laserdisc collection. And so what he
that's
would do
cool.
is he'd be like, "Hey man, you might be into this thing called like Twin Peaks, or you might check out this guy Dario Argento, and
Wild.
have you ever seen Dawn of the Dead?" And I would just go home with like stacks and stacks of VHS tapes and just devour them.
That's
And that
incredible.
was
What a
really like what
resource. That's huge. Yeah.
amazing, amazing.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, it sounds a little hokey, but like legitimately like changed
No,
the
no.
direction of my life.
Yeah, for that time,
Yeah,
like that's a cool person to have in there. Kind of
totally.
just say, just check out some different stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, he was amazing. In fact, I actually saw him last week.
Oh my
We
god.
had breakfast together, and he's just amazing. He's an amazing guy. I can't say enough good things about Marty Johnson. He was just like a really great guy, and I know touched like a lot of different people's lives as well. And so yeah, I was off and running. I was like a totally obsessive fiend, and I was like, I need to be making movies. But I was also playing music at the time, and it was just kind of like making a racket and, playing crummy shows. And, that while I was in college just kind of kept going. And I started a band in college with a buddy of mine, Monty Buckles. And, went down that road
A
while
director,
we
a director in his own right as well.
yeah,
Monty's
he
a
did
director.
some music videos. He
Yeah.
did some music videos. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a super talented sound guy. And yeah, so and we met in college and had a lot of similar interests. And we're
That's
like,
cool.
hey man, let's start a band. And he kind of didn't know how to play guitar, and in my previous bands I had played like bass guitar, but I was like, "Oh, I could maybe kind of hold a beat, so I'll play drums." And then we started playing, and then started putting out records and touring, and did all that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, and SC was definitely the place to be. I mean, for that, for film school stuff, it was always, around that time, it was like SC, NYU, UCLA, were kind of the big three. And then Chapman
Yeah,
and, there are a lot of other kind of, resources too. But we sort of, we were that next generation
yeah,
after the film school brats of the 70s and 80s. And even the Quentin Tarantino sort of like post Tarantino video store nerd,
yeah,
sort of world of like, okay, if you can be obsessed with film, you can make a film. It
yeah.
didn't seem like too
It,
far of a jump.
and I think I was like you. I mean, back to your original question, like, what was my experience like there? It was kind of disappointing. I'll tell
Oh,
you, it was like
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
disappointing
I want
because,
to
like,
hear it. Yeah, because I didn't
yeah,
go, so
yeah,
in my mind, I think
yeah,
I've kicked rocks for years, going,
yeah,
oh, if I would have
yeah.
gone there, I could have done something.
Man, well, it
But
was funny because it was like I went in there with like, thinking it was going to be all these other people that were like discovering Ingmar Bergman and like the French New Wave, like I just had, and instead,
the
you
first day
know,
you watch Robert Zemeckis,
what's funny is Robert Zemeckis gave me my diploma like
of,
when I
of course,
graduated,
of course.
you know,
God bless
but
Bob Zemeckis. Yeah,
it was like, I came into the dorm like, this punk that was looking to make weird art movies. And,
yeah.
I had like my guitar amp and some of my gear and my records and like, you
Ready to
know,
fuck shit
uh,
up. Here we go.
yeah, exact 100%. And then I'm like passing like room after room, and it was like on the dorm floor that I was on. And it was like, Princess Leia standees in the room and like, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I was like, oh, whoa. Like, I got no beef with those movies. I mean, I grew up in
Sure.
that era, but I was like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's not a
Yeah.
bunch of like, punks like smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee and
No.
like talking about like,
The revolution. This is how
yeah,
we're gonna
no, no,
do
no,
it.
no,
Yeah,
was
yeah,
not it. So
yeah.
it was a little bit, it was a little bit frustrating for me there. And but then I also had like a minor in photography there, and they were very inspiring to me, and I was able to, do some of the stuff that I was really wanting to do within the fine arts school.
That's cool. Yeah, I definitely got the sense from going in as an undeclared undergrad, because I heard that was easier to get into the film school if you were undeclared. And I didn't know what I was doing. I applied to Loyola Marymount and SC because I liked KXLU, and then the other one I loved Star Wars. So again, I was a Star Wars and a noise and Thurston Moore fan. So I was trying to figure out okay, and I went, and then I took a critical studies, like critic, whatever 101 kind of thing. I was like, this is cool, like Drew Casper and Todd Boyd
Yeah,
and these great, kind
yeah,
of names of like, cinema academia. And it was, and at the time I was like, this is cool, but this isn't what I want, And then I also took linguistics 101, when they started talking about Noam Chomsky and generative syntax. And I'm like, who's this
yeah,
Noam Chomsky guy? Like, oh, wait a second, this is way more my speed. Like this is revolutionary in a kind of way
yeah,
that's like, okay, here's people doing shit. And so I ended up
yeah,
getting a linguistics degree, but I kept taking all the critical studies classes, and all the production kids just complained. Like, we don't even get to shoot anything on film until our third year. And that's only if
yeah,
we get selected. And it was like by committee, and there was a big
yeah,
popularity contest and all these things. I would hear those guys, just pissing and moaning
yeah,
and smoking cigarettes. And I was like, okay, I
yeah,
don't think this wasn't the punk experience that I was hoping for. And again, that same
yeah,
kind of thing. I remember I even went to a guide, guidance counselor, and it's like, can I create like a semiotics degree, where I'm taking linguistics and film critical theory, and like kind of look at like, larger sort of like world as language, or image as language, and they're kind of advertising and these things. He's like, no, we don't do that. Not for undergrad. He's like, that
yeah.
sounds like a great PhD thesis, but we're not going to do that for you, you know?
Yeah, it was funny because, like, all of what you described is definitely part of that experience. But then, like, I was off in the fine art school, like, hand developing 16
Oh,
millimeter
yeah.
film and
That
like
fine arts
doing,
campus was amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
doing like live scores to like these weird,
I saw
scratched up,
I saw Paul
yeah, movies.
McCarthy give a talk inside the fine art, like,
Yeah,
keeping my eyes open to all the other stuff that was
yeah,
available there. And I had a radio show at 6 a.m. in the morning, the college radio thing, and I got to listen to all the
yeah,
cool, the late, new releases and make mixtapes for myself. And there's a lot of good to come out of it. But yeah, but you had
yeah,
to sort of
yeah,
find a
man.
space to it.
It's
That's
funny.
incredible. Do you see
Yeah, it's
the
funny.
the Barbara Kruger like benches? They're like hidden behind the gallery, like right on not Jefferson, but there's incredible. There's like amazing
Oh,
stuff there that it's like, but it's hidden. It's still there.
yeah,
We were at the science center the other day when I was driving by. It's like behind those rose bushes right there on the USC campus is this incredible Barbara Kruger like stone bench
yeah,
sculpture that like nobody, she's not known for working in that art in that medium anyway. But the fact that
yeah.
but it's there was commissioned or something. It was like
Oh, I didn't realize.
insane.
I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
There's fun. Yeah. And then the Phil, did you ever go take the Phil? Sorry, it's turning into SC talk, but
Yeah.
the philosophy library, did you ever go in there?
Well, what's
Yeah.
funny is that I worked, I had like a work study in there for a little bit,
So
and I had a
that's one of the
work.
best buildings on the campus.
Yeah, it's really cool. And yeah, yeah. No, I had a couple of like work studies where I was like, it was some of the libraries. And then I
Yeah.
ended up while I was there, I was like one of like the managers of like the photo lab, which was
Oh,
great. That was a
what you want to
great.
be, right? There, you get your access
Yeah,
to
because I had the keys
dark
and I could
rooms and
go in when
chemicals.
I
And
could, yeah, I
wow,
could go in whenever I want. And they had a color printer. And that was great.
that's
Yeah.
so cool. Yeah. My work study stuff was all at the Annenberg School of Communications. I was like in charge of the computer lab, if that dates it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Before people had, like,
Yeah.
I didn't have a computer when I went to college. All through the
Neither did
computer,
I.
I wrote all my papers on campus. And I
Yeah,
never had to
same.
do homework. I just would go into the libraries and write all my papers.
Yeah, and you'd have
When I,
stuff on like a floppy disk to like drop off at the printing place to have them
yeah,
print it out for
and
you.
then yeah, but it
It's
was great because
insane.
then when I was home or when I lived with a friend, then I would just party. Then we just drank
Yeah,
beer and went to
totally.
shows
Yeah.
and rode bikes around and
Yeah.
did
No,
everything else. Like it was never I
we
never
would
thought
have
about
been good
school.
friends. We would have definitely been good friends.
Yeah, I mean, because that's where I fell in with everybody at the Smell and stuff. Ended up riding my bike from West Hollywood to USC, and then after
Yeah.
class, riding up to the Smell, like riding up to like Figaro, and then like or go to practice at downtown rehearsal, and then riding back to LA. I think that was
Yeah.
my junior and senior year there. I think I dropped like 80 pounds once I started riding my bike everywhere. It was
Yeah,
insane.
man. I remember when the smell it was in like North Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
still like
Yeah, we
98.
would
Yeah, it's probably right when
yeah,
you
we
moved
would
up.
go
Yeah.
yeah, we would go there. Yeah, I saw a couple of really cool shows there.
Yeah, that's where I first went there. I saw Mike Watt do like a solo bass thing there. It was like first time going to
Yeah.
the Smell. It was like written up in the LA calendar, the LA Times calendar section.
Yeah, I think I saw like
Yeah.
Calvin Johnson do something
That
was
makes
one of them
sense.
for sure.
Yeah.
And,
So
like a
cool.
really early version of, I don't know, Phil Elverum did
Oh,
something
okay.
too.
Like Mount
Yeah.
Erie stuff before that, or
Yeah, but like
microphones
pre
or whatever.
whatever it was pre that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How fun. Yeah, that was okay. So SC, and then so you graduate, but then are you making films in college? Did you get to actually make a film,
Yeah,
or
I
that was
mean, I made like, you have classes where you make short films and things
okay?
like that. And I
Were you
then
there
would
with
do,
the George Lucas in Love people? Was that your era? That was like that year or the
oh,
year after?
I don't think so. I don't think
Okay.
so. Yeah.
Anyway,
And then I ended up doing this like, you know, I got like a small grant from the art school that covered like film stock. And I kind of had worked on this like hand developed like 16 millimeter film
well,
that was like part narrative, part silent movie. It was like a silent movie with that I ultimately did with like a live music
mhm.
score to it that was improvised that we did on campus in the theater there. And so I was kind of like working on that and working on a lot of photography stuff. So I finished like all of my requirements with the film school pretty early on in production because I was in the production program and was trying to do an independent study with them. Because at the time I was also like PAing and interning on like music videos back when that was like a big
Huge
cash
industry.
cow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So worked on everything from like NSYNC and Britney Spears and stuff like that. And so I was like working a lot in that music video world, just like paying the bills and working at a video store and just like getting
Which
by.
video
And
store did
then
you work at?
I actually worked at a Blockbuster because I could walk there. It was a Blockbuster that used to be across the street from the Vista.
Oh, yes, yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was huge.
yeah,
That's hilarious. I
yeah.
worked at Rocket Video
Oh, the
on
one on La
Melrose in La
Brea?
Brea. Yep, because I
Yeah,
lived right over
yeah,
there. I could walk there,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then I worked at the Sunset Five for a while, and there was another little
Oh man,
theater right on La Brea called the Regal or Regent. It was just
I
like a
think it
big
was
one
I think it
screen
was
art
the
house
Regent. I
thing.
think it was the Regent. Yeah,
Regent. Yeah, I
yeah.
got a job there. That was like one of my first jobs in LA. After I worked at the skate shop on Melrose, Atomic, what was it called? Atomic Skateboards or something. And then I got another job over there at the movie theater just tearing tickets. But they were a whole racket because they had an inside like production company, and they would just do blow up in the projection room in the back room, like
Yeah,
all these like
amazing.
older
Yeah,
gay like production guys that were just scamming money. And it was like they made this horrible film called The
yeah,
Invincibles, and they were just like the movie, the screen thing was like the least of their concern, and I was there just because I love. But
yeah,
we showed like Cecil B. Demented and Amelie. We were there for like the Sorrow
yeah,
and the Pity re-release, the four
yeah,
hour
yeah,
black and white
yeah,
French occupation film with like a half hour thing from Annie Hall. It was great. I loved all of that stuff. But
yeah,
there's so much other
yeah,
stuff post work curriculum. I was like, no, I'm not into this. Would go to the New Beverly all the time. I'd have to go to the New
yeah.
Beverly,
Same.
pick up like syrup, or if we ran out of syrup or popcorn kernels, like run over there and grab the stuff to popcorn.
That's funny.
Anyway,
Yeah, man. It's like I mean, it's Los Angeles. It's like amazing for stuff like that.
yeah.
I had my car stolen at the New
Oh,
Beverly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds right.
You know.
Yeah, that's
Um,
wild. Yeah, no, it would always be like the late night movies, and people would just be passed out there. Or like,
yeah,
there was the other great dollar movie theater that I think became a Lemley, but it's gone. But right off of Fairfax and Beverly,
yeah.
that was great. That was a dollar
It
movie
was
theater
like,
for a long
yep.
time.
Yeah, it was great. There was one on Hollywood and like Vine. I think it might have even been called the Vine Theater, if I remember
Okay,
correctly.
yeah,
And that thing was like a $1 or $2 movie theater.
I remember
And I
that
just
one. Yeah.
remember going there a couple of times. There was this like kind of transient dude, ex-girlfriend of mine had kind of befriended, and he remember taking him to see like he really wanted to see one of the Jurassic Park sequels. I forget which one it
Oh
was,
God.
but I just remember going to that theater with this like, transient to
Oh
like
Lord.
watch one of the Jurassic Park sequels. He was kind of disappointed with it though. He
Well,
wasn't feeling it.
they were disappointing compared to that
Yeah, I
first one was
know.
groundbreaking, and
Yeah,
then
he
he's
was
not
not
wrong.
wrong.
He's not wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. He
yeah,
should have his own blog now, writing about
yeah.
film
Oh,
criticism.
I would totally read that. He
I
was a
did get
character.
I did get to go while I was at SC because I was just always looking through the LA Weekly and just always just you scour for things, right? But there was a great screening, anniversary screening of Easy Rider with Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda somewhere on Wilshire, like one of the theaters screening
Yeah.
rooms on Wilshire. And it was great because I feel like there was so much animosity in the room. Like after the film ends, then everyone gets up on stage to do a Q&A, and you could just feel the tension. And here's
Yeah.
this transcendent. I'm like 18.
Yeah.
It's like first time ever seeing Easy Rider. I was like, I don't know. I've heard this was a good
Yeah.
movie, and I went and saw it. And my mind is blown. And then
Yeah.
these two just like bitter, pissy old men get up there and just like snipe at each other from
Oh, that's amazing.
across the stage for 20
Yeah.
minutes. So someone just goes like, okay, we're done here. Everyone leave.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
we're gonna pull the plug on this thing because they just keep just
Yeah.
attacking each other verbally. I was like, whoa.
What are I'm always, I'm curious because I'm fascinated by this. Like, what were the you as a movie fan, what were those movies that like, you saw like, in your teenage years, that you were kind of like, oh wow, this isn't just like popcorn fare. There's maybe
Oh God.
something bigger cooking within in
Yeah.
cinema.
It was like
Like, what
Wings
are
of
some of the
Desire.
ones from, yeah,
Yeah, Wim Wenders. I think it definitely was one of those first ones. Just being in black and white and Columbo, and there's a kind of meta
yeah,
sort of thing to it all. That I loved, and the Nick Cage of it. I remember that being one of those things we got from the Hollywood Video. It wasn't the Blockbuster didn't have
yeah,
the art section, but the Hollywood Video in Pointy Hills had a good art section. It was like definitely that, and I think that sort of led to like I remember it was the Night on Earth was an early one my
yeah,
brother showed me, and then again kind of seeing just like Jim Jarmusch and like just short film things, and
yeah,
like, oh, I know her, Winona Ryder from Beetlejuice. I knew Beetlejuice, but here she is in a very different kind of role.
yeah,
So I mean, nothing super underground, but just stuff that was like just enough that kind of new
yeah,
independent cinema of the '80s, and then but stuff like that. It was definitely like, okay, there's a real things here. But it's something even like 12 Monkeys. I remember watching
yeah,
that at like the big budget movie theater place and just being like, this is weird. This is
yeah,
very different. And then reading in magazines and Premiere or something, it was like, this is a La Jetée. This is based on
yeah,
an experimental French film or something. You're like,
yeah,
okay. They're just trying to find
yeah.
that somewhere. And
But
those
it's
little
cool
things.
because that leads you down the path of,
Totally.
you've got these little breadcrumbs that lead you down the path. And that's
Yeah.
where some of the magic is, right? Is in the discovery, as opposed, not to like be old man on
Oh
the
yeah.
porch
No,
about
no.
it, but it's like now it's just sort of like, you just type into the machine and it's like, yeah, and here's like, 20 things. And you're like, oh, now I know the 20 things that influenced,
Everybody's got a list.
everybody else.
Yeah.
But there was a little bit more of like,
Or even
the
Criterion, you
discover.
know what I mean? The
Yeah,
curatorial sort of thing. Like you just go, well, if it's Criterion, it's got to be good. You know, you,
100%. Yeah, no. I think
yeah,
that was a big part of it for me too, is that, there's a couple of movies I saw early
what was,
on.
flip the question back. You're so sweet to
Yeah.
ask me a question, but I'll ask you the same
I,
question.
I,
Yeah. What do you think?
I mean, there's, I so vividly remember this, when I saw Taxi Driver for the first time.
Mm.
And I was like old enough to like register everything, I was
Hmm.
like a teenager and I was really getting into movies. And I remember going to a friend's house. I think I even might have snuck out of my house, and went to his house, and he had somehow finagled like like a 27-inch TV in his bedroom, and he had like his hi-fi hooked up to it, and we watched Taxi Driver, and I was just like
Holy
really
shit.
just blown away, like
Yeah.
totally blown away because I hadn't seen anything like it. It's super, it's a bleak movie,
Hmm.
but I just remember it was late at night and it was a school night, and I just left his house and he was like walking distance from my house, and I just like walked around the neighborhood like I'm like
Waiting
like
for that rain to clean the gutters.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
here we are.
exactly. No, I just like walked around the neighborhood, like really just kind of like in shock, like, oh my
What the
God,
fuck did I just
this
see?
is like
Yeah.
amazing and like
Yeah.
so provocative, and I could not stop thinking about it. And I don't know, special. It's like
Yeah.
occasionally I still have moments like that. And it's like anybody that's like really into music or really into movies or anything like that, you're just like the well is so so deep,
Oh yeah.
and just when you think you've like, you know oh, I think I've seen a lot of it, then somebody might go like, hey, but dude, have you seen this? And then you watch it and you're like, oh my God, and you appreciate things for different reasons now. Like,
Totally.
you might
Yeah.
appreciate something because it's kind of scrappy and it takes some crazy risks, and you're just like, I can't believe that they did that.
Yeah.
It might not
Yep.
be an amazing movie from start to finish like Taxi Driver is, but it's still
You can
like, I mean,
appreciate
I
the
just, I
parts that
just
make even if the
man,
whole isn't working. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh
man,
yeah.
that's what gets me high now.
Well, I crossed through the portal of parenthood, and it really just it just warped everything. My
Every,
time is so like bizarre. And in terms of what I can watch, you know what I mean? I think there's even just stuff that like post being a dad, it's like I can't watch this shit. I can't watch anything violent, really. You know what I mean? It's like my heart is just lives like right under my chest, right,
yeah,
just under my skin, and so like I'll cry at the dumbest, sappiest stuff, and then I'll just be repulsed and just have to turn away from. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
Jackass is too violent for me, and I was like, I can't watch this. I can't. Like, I've seen too much in life. Like, because they remind me of my kids now. I've become the other
Yeah.
person from the kid jumping off the stairs on the skateboard to now the dad. Like, somebody's gonna hurt. Don't they know how much that costs to get your clavicle reset? Like now as a parent with health insurance, I'm like, no, these kids in
Oh,
this
that's
world, they're
funny.
never going to financially recover from that fall. It's going to have a concussion and a limp for the rest of his life. Yeah, it's changed everything. But I wish. Yeah, no, I long for the time when I just get to sit around watching movies again. I think that's the other thing too. Is just time. I got like 10 seconds at a time to watch a movie now. It's rare we could sit long
Yeah,
enough to
well,
have that, but
uh,
it's incredible.
I'm, it's a compulsion for me, and I'm like a movie a day kind of guy,
Really,
is
that's
where
incredible.
I'm at, and it's been. I mean, this is more of like a probably a post-pandemic kind of
Hmm.
thing,
Sure.
but now it's just like
New
the
stuff? How often do you
new.
what's your ratio of new to old?
It's probably like, I would say probably 25% is new, the rest is
That's
old.
good.
I
That's
mean,
good.
I'm like a go
Yeah.
to the theater guy. I mean, I go to the theater, try to go multiple times during the week, new stuff, old stuff.
That's great.
I mean, I'm out in the theater all the time, but I'm
That's good.
also, you know, watching stuff on disc, or I'm watching stuff, streaming on friends' Plex servers, and all,
Oh
all,
yeah,
all the
yeah.
ways now that you have available to you. It's pretty
the
cool.
the last 10 films I've seen have all been animated films in the movie theater since like December. Like just saw the day the Earth blew up, and we got our tickets for Minecraft film. Like I can't me going to a movie now is again, that's what I'm saying. Like I've been baptized or changed or mutated. Now it's like to sit in a movie theater and watch adults that have been photographed with real light. It sounds amazing. Sounds like such a
Yeah.
indulgence. I can't even imagine.
Well, I'm making up for both of us. So
Good. Thank you. Thank you. You're doing the good
yeah,
work for,
yeah,
for those of us
yeah, yeah, yeah,
who are going to soccer practice. Like, oh, isn't there something dark and foreign that can be watched
yeah,
right now? But also, I have
yeah.
no energy too. And when the opportunity does come, like, it's on Netflix. It's right here. You can watch it. I'm like, I'm not going to watch Nora. I'm sorry. I'm not going to watch Timothy Chalamet pretend to be Bob Dylan. I only got this one night for the last month. I have one night to watch a movie. I'm not going to watch that movie.
Well,
But
it's
that's
well,
just
it's
me.
funny that in the age of apps that we're in, it's like
Yeah.
I use this movie app Letterboxed
Oh yes,
just
of
as a way to
course.
log
Yeah.
everything, and to keep track, because my memory is garbage, and it's also cool to see what your buddies are watching and all that,
Sure. Yeah.
and I'm definitely a fan of them, and I but they have this function on the app where you can see like how many hours you watched in like a year.
Oh
And
wow.
then when I start to do like the math on how many days that was I watched movies, and it's like, okay, like I last year I think a month of my life was spent watching movies.
Hey.
So,
There's worse things you could be
you
doing
know,
with your time, though. You know what I mean? Like those
I
aren't.
don't know what,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
I
not
don't know
video
what I'll be,
games. It's not
yeah,
gambling. It's not strip
totally.
clubs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's a lot of worse
exactly.
things you could be doing. I
Yeah.
will watch Red Letter Media though on YouTube. I feel like they watch a lot of really bad films. Or it's like a group of guys in Milwaukee. Do you know
Uh-huh.
this
No, I
YouTube channel?
don't.
Oh, it's great. Red Letter Media. They did the prequel sort of takedown analytics stuff. I think they first kind of came to notoriety like 15 years ago when they were making fun of Star Wars stuff. That's how it came to me. But their whole channel is
Oh,
great.
okay.
They're obsessive movie nerds that
Yeah.
that have a few different anyway. They're great. They're great in terms of just making fun of film. That's the thing I do miss is from working in movie theaters and video stores is just getting together with other movie nerds and talking shit. Like
Yeah,
so I find there's other media, there's podcasts. I think probably half the podcasts I listen to are just about bad movies or just movie
yeah.
podcast stuff where people are just making fun of movies. I was like, this is great. This is what I need in my
Well,
life.
my friend of mine started this during the pandemic. As a way he had programmed movie screenings in New
Mm-hmm.
York when he was there, and then when he moved out to LA, that the pandemic had happened, and he still wanted to maintain that, so he started this trash movie club, is what it's
Oh, how
called, and
fun.
and it's like once a week, you know. And he's still been doing, and I came to it a couple of years back, but he's hasn't missed a day
Oh,
basically in like
amazing.
the last whatever 4 or 5 years, and it's once a week, and he programs everything, and it'll be like there's a movie that's programmed that we watch and then talk about, and then we watch over like Zoom collectively, but then
Oh,
the chat's up, so everybody's just like talking shit about the movie while it's going,
that
because
sounds
usually
amazing. Yeah.
they're not the highest caliber of movies,
Sure. We do
and so
live in
it's
a golden
super.
age of trash cinema, with like Vinegar Syndrome and, some of
Oh,
these other like distributors and stuff. They're doing great jobs. Even
totally.
Alamo,
I mean,
finding
yeah, I
these
mean,
like
it's some of the stuff too where you're just like, I can't believe I'm
Jim
seeing
Cotta,
this.
Miami Connection. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
all these things are
but
just.
they like look pristine.
Mhm.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and the great stuff is too, like even the shittiest B movies from the 80s and even into the 90s, they're still shot on film. There's still like
Oh yeah.
like wildly talented people working behind the scenes to make these horrible movies. But if you look how it's lit and how it's shot and how you know what I mean, maybe the director is bad, but there was a DP who knew how to use a light source. So it's like these some
Yeah.
of these horrible films from the last from that era, from the 80s and 90s, look infinitely better than anything in the last 20 years, where you just everything's moved to digital, you know.
Yeah. I mean,
If nothing else, it's very watchable to see those bad
totally,
films from that
totally.
time. If nothing,
Yeah, totally. Or
some
there's also like, because everybody's so savvy in how they watch things, and lower budget digital effects are, pretty glaring
mm-hmm.
sometimes, current,
Oh
present
yeah, yeah.
day. But if you go back to like a movie like trashy action movie from the 80s,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like, oh
Practical
man, no,
squibs. They were like, yeah,
they're blowing
there's
shit up.
fire. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
fire on
there's
screen.
real. There's like
Someone got
real.
hurt.
Yeah, there's exactly. So
Yeah,
that makes it a little bit more entertaining, because like, oh, maybe that guy might have lost that leg. I
yeah,
don't know. If you're a sicko like me,
yeah.
you're just like, whoa,
That
did that
was
guy get a walk away from that? I don't know, because that stunt looked incredibly dangerous.
that fall. They never cut from the fall. You're
No,
supposed to at least
yeah,
cut at some point to someone
yeah,
else's
exactly.
reaction so they can cut back to
Yeah,
where the body hits or
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
dummy.
exactly.
But they'd never cut away.
Yeah,
That's not right. That's
yeah,
not good.
yeah. No, I
I shouldn't be
don't think that
watching
guy
this.
made it.
Yeah, they definitely did not shoot this in America. This was shot
Yeah,
somewhere else.
yeah,
That's where you start
yeah.
looking up locations. You're like, ooh, that wasn't
Yeah,
good.
yeah. This
Yeah,
was shot in like,
there's
somewhere in
no
Malaysia,
oversight
and you're
there. Like,
just like, yeah.
nope, no, it's not good. I was just telling a friend about Milo and Otis. I don't know if you remember this. It was like a
Uh-huh.
cat and dog thing.
Yeah.
So many of those animals died. It was a
So
Japanese
sad.
production with no
Yeah.
oversight. It was like one of the worst animal snuff
Yeah.
films like ever. But I loved it as a kid. It was one of my favorite
Yeah.
movies as a kid. And I would like just do a quick Google. We'll just kind of show you the atrocities of that film. You're like,
Oh,
oh
so
god,
yeah, that
yeah,
that 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 rabbit hole's a bummer to go
yeah,
down.
yeah. Okay, so you come out of SC and now you're PAing, you're interning. What are you doing? What's
Yeah,
happens
I mean,
next
I
after
spent a
college?
lot. I spent a lot of time working, PAing on music videos and photo shoots and things like that. I was a location scout. All any of the. I worked at a music video production company as like an
Mm-hmm.
executive's assistant, and that was like everything from dubbing tapes to editing director reels to any of that's rewriting director
Oh
treatments.
wow.
For videos that we were pitching on,
Anything good
and
from that era? Anything good get made?
no,
No.
not really. I mean, a lot of weird experiences, where you're,
Mm-hmm.
that were like totally entertain, just like weird random things. It's like, oh, weird. Somehow I ended up like, hanging out with Gene Simmons for like a night. That was weird,
Yeah.
stuff like that. There's tons of like weird anecdotes like that, but that's also just like living in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But there wasn't really, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I worked on this NSYNC music video and I was just like, dude, these guys suck. Like, I already thought they sucked, but like, as people, they were so rude and so mean and like throwing water bottles at people and making people pick up trash. And it's
Horrible.
just like, just makes you realize it's like
Yep.
so many, when people are really cool, like the artists that were like at that caliber really cool, you're like, oh, right on. Like Richie
Yeah.
Sambora, he was pretty cool, when I met him. Like
He doesn't.
he was the cool dude.
Yeah, when you realize he doesn't have to be. When you see people like
Yeah.
with half of his talent and half of
Yeah.
his notoriety be just the worst
Yeah,
monsters
but like
you ever
whoever that
see.
dreadlocked dude in
Yeah.
sync was, like that guy was a prick.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
just a total prick. And it
Yeah.
was just like,
It's insane. I
whatever.
had
But I mean that's the funny stuff though when you're working on things
oh
like that.
totally. Yeah, I had I worked at the Sunset 5 on Christmas Day. This was probably in 2000 or 2001 or something, and Jim Carrey came in and was the nicest guy ever in the world. He tried to tip me $20 just for buying a popcorn, and I was like, I
Yeah,
can't take it. And he's like, no, just here, just take it, just here. It was just, I was like, no, I can't do it. I was just so it's also like, this is fucking Jim Carrey. He's like, okay, you sure? I was like, yeah.
yeah,
Have a good Christmas. Enjoy whatever he's watching with his kids, or with Jenny McCarthy's
dude.
kids, or whatever. You know what I mean? But it was
Yeah,
just the nicest guy. I was like, wow, seemed like a real person. It was like a
dude.
really
The
nice
Grinch
time.
hooked you up on Christmas. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. Um,
uh,
so then,
but
so then from that,
yeah,
but you're not falling out of love with film. I think that's the hard part. Is that's
no,
that kind of window of time where like you
yeah,
see too much, or you just get shit on for long enough, and you just can be like,
yeah.
all right, I'm out.
Well, and then, I had some like life diversions and all that stuff. And then I would just like, there was a moment where I was trying to get my MFA in photography, and
Oh,
that
cool.
wasn't that was like bad timing in terms of like what was happening in my life. And then I just kind of fell into this, world of working in post production, to pay the bills and everything. And then that kind of became for a bit, and it still is to a degree, a bit of a career. And but at the same time, I've still had never lost this desire of like making things. So over the last, I would say, 6 years or so, I got really really focused and dedicated on trying to you know make as much work as I possibly could. And so that started with short films and then trying to reacquaint myself because some time had lapsed. So, like, learning how to use some of the new tools, making, friendships with other collaborators that I could work with. And then that turned into doing music videos for people that I was fans of their music or they were friends, and then that ultimately just exercising those filmmaking muscles, and all of it I looked at was like kind of like steps towards making a feature length movie. And so now that that's coming out, that's really exciting.
That's so cool. And then just in terms of the behind the scenes, nuts and bolts of it. I mean, were these self financed sort of shorts and music videos and things like, or just
Yeah,
small budget, micro budget things like
yeah,
that? That's
yeah.
always a
So the
huge
sh-
part.
the most of the shorts were like self-financed, and so it was like learning a lot about like how much costs what and what I can get away with, and this is the mechanics of all of that. But then some I was paid to do. I had done a thing with Hulu and like the Sundance Institute for like a horror short film, and that was like something that was funded by them.
Oh, how cool.
Uh, but then on the music video side, all of the music videos, were done on like the lower budget, micro budget kind of scale, for the groups that I did them for.
That's so cool. And then then are you writing as well? Are you
Yeah,
busting out scripts left and right? I mean, that's the other
yeah,
sort of thing that doesn't cost a lot, but it is definitely
yeah,
needed to sort of kick off any project.
yeah. So, I had, been working on a couple of scripts. I had one that, was close to being financed, and, that was looking really promising. And then it just didn't work out. And that's some of the stuff that's just natural when you're trying to make movies.
Yep.
And I've been really I was frustrated, so I through a combination of some other financing and self-financing, I put together a project that I thought was like very makeable, and kind of cashed in a lot of favors and goodwill and all of that, and then that was how we were able to make a desert, which is the movie that's coming out.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about it. I mean, I know as of this point I haven't seen it, but hopefully I'll get to watch it
Yeah,
before before this comes out. But I've heard a little bit from the behind the scenes in terms of who was cast, and I've been
yeah,
friends of friends have been keeping me in the loop. I was like, good for Josh, that's awesome, how exciting!
yeah,
But tell me about it.
yeah, yeah. So the movie is basically it's like a it's like a surreal horror neo noir. So it's about a guy who's a fine art photographer that is like going out to try to recapture. He's like sort of in the later period of his career. He's kind of like in a little bit of the creative doldrums. So he kind of is going out on this road trip to kind of recapture some of the mojo he had previously in his career. And as he's going out and taking photographs, his like main area of interest is like the American Southwest. And while he's out doing this, he ends up staying at this seedy motel. And while he's at the motel, he meets some uh, unsavory folks, and they lead him down a path of darkness that ultimately brings his wife along with him and a private investigator that the wife has hired to try to get to the bottom of what's happening. So
Oh, it sounds
it's a
exciting.
yeah, it's a movie, that's also about movies and image making, and that plays a big part of it. There's a lot that I was trying to say with the movie that is about that and how movies can be a mirror of our life, and how we also reflect back on our own experience through the lens of movies. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot of that stuff cooking in a very sort of familiar genre movie.
Wow. Well, it sounds exciting. This is great. And I know, not to spoil anything, but David Yao
Yeah,
from the Jesus Lizard
yeah,
is a
yeah,
character in the film.
yeah. David plays the sketchy private detective that is hired to see what has been going on with our photographer character. And that was really cool. I've been a fan of David's music for a long time, both the Jesus Lizard and Scratch Acid. And as I was writing the script, I was thinking, man, David, and I'd seen him in a couple of movies, and I was like, oh my gosh, like David's amazing. Like he's a really great actor. And I was like, man, he would make a really great sketchy private eye. And so I met with him, and he was really excited about it and really liked the character, and he was just like a total treat to work with. It's funny because, and I don't think he would be upset if I said this, but I think at least my perception of him as this crazy wild man on stage, like working with him on the movie, he's just like the sweetest, nicest guy, like
That's
really
great. Yeah.
sweet, like it's like very sweet texts I would get from him where it's just like, I think David Young just sent me a text with a heart emoji, like so I
Like,
wouldn't
how is
have, I
this
wouldn't
right?
have guessed that, I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah. Well, how wild. No, I remember when he first moved to LA, he kind of hung out in similar sort of circles, and just seeing him out socially was always surreal. I was like, oh shit, that's David Yao.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, but he's a talented performer, whether what he's doing in the band, and that's obviously something different, but like as an actor, he's just got like amazing presence, and his face just is like
it does
it's great.
90% of the work. The old
Oh,
hatchet
it's really
face just
and no,
kept
he's real.
every crevice and everything just soaks up the shadows.
He's yeah. So I think people will be really excited to see him in the movie.
That's cool. Well, how do people watch the movie? What's the best way for
Yeah,
people to see it?
yeah. So the movie's going to be released in theaters on May 2nd, and then it will be on VOD at the same time. So there will be. We're waiting to find out exactly the breadth of the release, but it'll be in most major should be in most major cities in the U.S.
That's awesome. And then VOD, is that's through Apple or through
Yeah, that would
wherever
be
you,
like through
Amazon.
Amazon. That's
Okay,
like, video on demand, whatever the, transactional rental or purchasing through
sure.
iTunes,
Cool.
Amazon, Google, however you do that. And then ultimately, I think it'll end up on some streaming platform.
Very cool. And then it's because we've talked about music and soundtracks and film and
Yeah.
things. So how was it making the sound and the soundtrack for the
Uh,
film? Tell me a little
oh
bit about that
man,
process.
that that was such a treat because um, I was able to work with some of my favorite musicians on the score and the music in the movie. So um, Ty Siegel and the the fellows that play in his band, Charles Moothart, Emmett Kelly, Ben Boy, and Michael Cronin, um, worked on the music and some of the score. And the approach was our main character in the movie, as he's driving around the desert, I wanted him to listen to jazz music. So in advance of us actually shooting the movie, um, Ty and the fellows all got together at Ty's studio and we recorded a full record's worth of improvised, sort of funky, sort of like, you know, tangentially influenced by like On the Corner Miles era stuff, and recorded all of this improvised music and with Greg Norman, and that was really cool. And so that record is going to actually come out later this year. So really excited about that. But so they did all this amazing music. So we have this awesome music that's in the movie that he's listening to from these amazing, amazing musicians. I mean, it was just like really cool to be in the studio with them while they were making that record. Like that was just great, and to know that it was just specifically for the movie was really cool. And so we had that music on set. So while we were shooting the shots of the character driving around the desert, we were playing it in the car stereo. So it was actually, you know, the energy and the feeling and the rhythm and all of that, we were able to, really capitalize on that. So that was really cool. So that is one component to the sound. And then the other on the music is the score. And Ty composed all of the music for the score. And he and I worked really closely on that. And so that was, think people will be kind of surprised as to his approach on it because it was very minimal, a lot of piano. I don't think we didn't use any guitars. There's some drums, there's some other percussion, some synthesizer, and then a lot of strings. So, we have some pretty lush string music cues in it that I think they turned out so good. And so it was just like having this awesome music, being able to collaborate with Ty and the band and all that was just so cool. And then I obviously, having recorded records and, you know, done all of that for so long, uh, being able to like go in with the sound designers that we had on the movie, Juan Campos and Zach Goheen, like and really build this. I'm really proud of the sound mix on the movie and the sound work on the movie. I think seeing it in the theater, it's really immersive, and we make some experimental choices in the movie. And the moments where that happens, I think, are really, really impactful. Seeing it in the theater, so that stuff was really, really fun because I mean, I love being in the studio. I like all the aspects of it,
Mhm.
but being in the lab, where it's like, oh, try this, try that, and you're not so rushed for time like you are on set. Like, I just love being in the edit bay with my editor, Star Rosenkrantz, and just being in the sound mix. It's just like such a treat. It's so fun.
That's incredible. Yeah, because you really get to stretch out and you can kind of shape the film and sure you're closer to what the
Yeah.
final product is going to be.
Yeah, or like, hey, you have so many options of what you can do. It's like, let's move that ambient sound to the back, or let's move it to the side. Let's make it feel really oppressive. And there's all of these things that you can do to really tell the story, you know, that you're trying to. And I think oftentimes, people aren't thinking about that. I write a lot of sound stuff into the scripts that I'm writing because I'm always thinking about it.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, what are some of your films? Some of your favorite films from a sound perspective that like you
Oh
really like
gosh.
watching or looking at?
Um, there's this a couple more recent movies. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously the work that like Alan Splett did on the early David Lynch movies, that stuff, is sort of like unparalleled, like next level, like this is that approach of
Yeah.
like really, really on the art form side of it, really pushing that. I would say that, but I also like even recently stuff like Andrew Dominik's movie Killing Them Softly, which you the opening of that movie is like there are real big risks taken in the sound mix in that movie, and it's just like uh really impressive to see that somebody's taking those kind of creative choices in a movie that has like somebody like Brad Pitt in it, and is being maybe marketed one particular way, and it's just a crime movie. It's a kind of like just a pulpy crime movie, but there's something else happening there on an artistic level. There was another movie, I forget the filmmaker's name, but it's got that actor Sean Harris in it. It's called The Stranger.
Hmm.
I think it's on Netflix currently, but the sound mix in that movie is and the sound design in that movie is just off the charts really great, where they're really making deliberate choices. It just isn't like, like so many of the movies that I find that typically get all the accolades for the sound
Hmm.
work. It's just because there's a lot of explosions or there's like, the science fiction stuff. But like, I love it when you see a movie that is more grounded in reality, but somebody is trying to take it to like another place to make it evoke some type of emotion, make you feel something different, and using that as a storytelling tool is just like when it happens, it's just the best.
Yeah, I always think of the Neverending Story. There was something about the compression or something. Now I learned about it as a kid. I didn't know why it was so special, but just everything,
Yeah,
when they're talking or when Sebastian's talking to himself, the whole thing, it feels like he's just right on, he's like eating the microphone.
yeah,
I have a feeling because it was a German production, they must have just ADR'd the shit out of it, and that's just how it was done. And they probably did it in Berlin somewhere
yeah,
at some David Bowie studio, and just had
yeah,
like the best microphones and the best compressors, and this like super like coked up engineer just like putting the kids like, no, you must eat the mic,
yeah,
be on top of it, it
yeah.
must be closer. It's just
But
incredible though.
it's funny. I speaking of sound and like choices and sound in movies. I I've seen the movie a bazillion times, but I recently went to maybe it was like last year. I went to a screening of Paris, Texas,
Oh god,
and
yeah.
I love the movie just like everybody.
Sure.
And um, I was
And the
watching the
soundtrack,
movie.
what a great soundtrack. Yeah.
Well, the soundtrack is amazing. The great Ry Cooder minimal,
Mm-hmm.
like slide guitar stuff. But something kind of dawned on me also knowing Wim Wenders' movies is that so many of his movies, which are the road movies, they have these great pop needle drop songs, right? Stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big music fan, so
Yeah.
everything the stuff that's playing in the car on the radio is like all really great. Perfect Days is all about a guy driving around with his music collection, his latest movie, and even like Kings of the Road, the guy's got a little 45 record player in his truck as he's driving around. But nothing is playing on the radio in Paris, Texas. And there's so much of the movie is in cars driving around. And to me, that is just like for a movie that is about America and the road trip to not have anything playing on the car,
Huh.
like I I I was just kind of taken by it
I wonder if he
because
didn't get the budget, or he could, if he did have things
I'm sure there's
tempt
some
in,
reason. I'm
and
sure
they
there's
just never.
some
Yeah.
reason, and
Yeah.
I haven't read anything or heard him talk about it. I'm sure there's some like practical reason of
He had
like,
nothing but like Bruce Springsteen wall to wall in there, and they just wouldn't give him the go ahead. Just wouldn't
yeah,
get it or something like that.
or even he had it in and he heard the Rycooter score and was like, this is better than anything I could ever have on the radio, and this means
Take it
something
out.
different.
Yeah.
Means something different. And I think When
adds to
you
the
see
isolation
somebody,
or that loneliness or something being in the car with no
totally,
sound. Yeah, yeah.
because
Huh.
that's part of what the movie's about, right? And so
Yeah.
having that choice, it totally changes what that movie would have potentially been in other hands or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Oh wow, that's interesting. That had never crossed my mind in watching that. There was a great you probably have it, a great photo book of just all of his behind the scenes and
Yeah,
just sort of just the photos he took in preparation, location scouting,
yeah,
and through production. Gorgeous
yeah.
book. Yeah,
Yeah,
such
no,
really gorgeous thing.
it's hard for that movie not to be like an
Robbie Mueller
influence.
did all this.
Yeah,
Right. Of
because
course, he
it's
had
like,
desert and things. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
and it's very much in my DNA. But with A Desert, the movie, the way that the script was written was a bit different than how I've approached anything. And what I did is I was like, well, I have this idea for this type of photographer character. And I was like, well, let me go ahead and like make his body of work. And I will go out as if I'm this guy and I will just take all of these photographs in a particular style that this photographer would. And so I amassed this collection of all of these photographs. And what happened ultimately was that some of these places that I encountered that I photographed ended up becoming locations in the movie. So it was this
Oh, how cool.
almost like this double way of like doing location scouting, but also understanding like what's going to happen in the movie, but doing it through the lens of the character. And so we have this. And in the movie, there's like the book of his photographs that plays like a role in the movie, and a
Mm.
photograph that he's taken previously plays an important role in the movie. So it all started coalescing into this thing that you know I think is pretty cool.
It's incredible, man. Well, Josh, thank you so much for jumping on. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're busy here,
Yeah,
but congratulations on the film. And again, is there a website for it, or how do people follow you? Do you have a
yeah,
social media sort of portal in for people? What's the best way for people to follow you and the film and make sure they get a chance to see it?
yeah. The film is being released by Dark Sky Films. So anything on any of their social media channels, it will be promoted on. I try not to be on social media as much, but I feel like it's a bit of a necessity in the world we live in. So, best way for me on social media is I'm mostly on Instagram. And so, my Instagram handle on there is Capes and Fog. And so I obviously just post about the movie these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the best way to find out about what's going on with the movie.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, I mean, I could do this for 6 more hours. This is always it's great to catch up and always fun to talk movies and talk LA and music and movies. It definitely, I'm inspired. I want to watch more movies. What else do you recommend people to go watch since you're out there? What would you put together for me to? What would you be your 5 films I should go watch? So if everyone wants to go do their
Oh my
homework,
gosh, just like,
yeah,
well, what I'll do is I'll give you five films or maybe four that were really
yeah,
influential in the making of this
perfect.
movie.
This is the homework that you could watch
See,
before you watch
yeah,
a desert. Yeah, watch these films.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so number one would be Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho.
Oh,
Uh, Number
you can't go
two
wrong with
would,
that. That's a
yeah,
what that okay. Yeah, I don't want to ask too
yeah,
much, but yeah, it's always good to watch that film. It's always fun to revisit
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Number two would be Antonioni's movie The Passenger
Hmm.
with Jack Nicholson. Number three would be this B movie from the 60s called The Sadist. Um, highly recommend that, starring Arch Hall Jr. Number four would be Texas Chainsaw Massacre, if you haven't seen that.
You know, I've never
I
seen
would
Texas Chainsaw
imagine,
Massacre. I've never
for
have.
real.
When I was a kid, my older brothers were watching it. And I think I walked in and just saw them all being pulled out of the van, and I was just like,
Yeah,
I must have been 5 years old or something. I was like, I can't watch this, and we're running out of there, and just
yeah,
forever is just frightening the shit, just scaring the shit out of me. And
yeah.
every time, throughout my life, I've seen clips or parts of it or little things. I'm just like, that looks like the scariest fucking movie I've ever seen in my entire life. I can't watch it.
It turned me
Sounds
into a
insane.
vegetarian as a teenager when I saw it. Seriously. Yeah. I
It's
saw
incredible.
it and I was like, oh my gosh. And I went home and my mom had just made like chicken or something.
Oh
And I was like, nope,
no,
I'm good. I
I'm
can't do
done.
it. No, I'm done. Uh,
Okay.
and yeah, number
Yeah.
5 would be, oh man, Paris,
Mm.
Texas.
Okay, the great. Yeah, I know. I was gonna throw out Tulane
Yeah.
Blacktop. Do we get down with Monty Hellman? Do we get
Oh,
in
I
that
love
world?
Money
You know?
Hellman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that energy in the movie
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, the American West and the road trip and the desert and the driving and I've had the sorry, I was just dragging on, but just being such a movie nerd and movie fan and just living in these like road trip films and then getting to tour throughout my 20s and 30s, it was always just great. I just find myself just on the road and just like, I have the soundtrack for this. I mean, I know what music I want to hear while
Yeah.
I'm driving through Nebraska, or I know what, I mean,
Yeah.
there's something so cinematic about, that American Midwest and
Yeah.
Southwest, just the big wide open things. I never really appreciated Black Sabbath till I took a motorcycle trip from LA to
Oh,
Texas, like going through the desert and coming over the vista where you drop down and you just see as far, to vanishing point of that highway with nothing on it. I was like, okay, this is now Black Sabbath made sense to me.
yeah. Oh, that's
So
awesome.
I was never a stoner. I was never, that kind
Yeah.
of heavy metal kid. But under that
Yeah.
context, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, okay, this
Yeah.
makes
And then
sense.
all of a sudden you notice that you're starting to drive,
Oh yeah,
you're going
go up to
faster.
100. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
open the
Yeah.
throttle while Ozzy sings. I was like, okay, this makes
Yeah.
sense now. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
How fun. Well, Josh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And everyone go out and see A Desert. It's available everywhere. It's taking over the world. It's online now.
Thanks, Randy.
Awesome. Thanks. All right, all right, all right. There's my interview with Josh Erkman. Oh man, so stoked. Yes, everybody go watch A Desert. It's out there everywhere in the world. You can go to capesandfog.com to learn more about Josh and about A Desert. You can also follow him on Instagram at capesandfog. And yeah, David Yao up there on the big screen. Come on, who doesn't want to see that? It is a great film and made by a great guy. Really stoked for Josh to be getting some shine, living in the limelight, living it up. All right, everybody, be well, have fun, be safe this weekend, and I will see you on Monday.
Movies are just like pictures and sound. It sounds so stupid. Movies are where it's at.